It's really interesting how I hear this a lot, that I was talking about anti-racism, trying to explain to people that there's racism, on one side you have racism, then in the middle you have not racist, and then on the other side you have anti-racism. Anti-racism and racism agree on many of the same constructs. They just disagree on who should benefit from them, I guess. Actually, it doesn't really make sense because anyone can be racist. But in the anti-racist worldview, like the Ibrahim X. Kendi guy, he views it as racists and anti-racists agree on the exact same things, except who should be benefiting the most from it. And so I think we want to be not racist. And we've been doing really, really well for a long time. But now they're recreating all of the identical systems under the guise of getting rid of them. The one thing I find truly fascinating about it is if you compare what they're saying now to, say, the dream of Martin Luther King Jr., it's completely at odds with everything he said. Yeah. So it's the weirdest thing to me when I see people holding up, signs at protests referencing, Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm like, but you don't agree with him. You disagree with him.
It's gone completely the other direction. Yeah. I don't know if you saw Martin Luther King's, his living daughter? She had a post on
his niece.
Yeah, his niece.
Yeah, I think it is,
okay.
yeah.
She had a post that she did on Twitter. I just couldn't believe it. It was a picture of a young black man holding a sign. What did the sign say? It said, like, "Dear white people, stop using Martin Luther King to further your agenda. You killed him too."
Yeah.
And that was just the most shocking thing because, as people rightfully commented, like, I would like to be judged by the content of my character rather than the color of my skin. It was the poster being held was doing exactly the opposite of what Martin Luther King suggests we do. Dear white people, that's just group blame. That's original sin for an entire group of people. That's the exact opposite of what the civil rights movement was based on.
So my prediction, I guess, is the Olympics will be a whole bunch of men, biological males. Well, according to Wikipedia, men, adult human males. There will be. Actually, you know what? We'll go into this because this is it's a weird thought. The Olympics allowing male individuals to compete in the women's division, won't that just over time create two divisions, the men's and the trans women's division?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically, it depends on if they want to just. Well, over time, yeah. I mean, basically, because the women's division will essentially just be dominated by males.
Yeah.
A lot of these trans activists in sports, though, they don't even want to have these different categories. There's a movement to just eliminate the categories and base it on just like weight or something like that, which would still eliminate female sports because even controlling for weight at every stage of the qualifying, it's much more dominated by males at every weight class.
I learned this. I think it was like a year or so ago. I was doing an interview with Dr. Deborah So. And in the course of the research for the segment, we did like a 10-minute interview, and then we put together sources and context in between some of the things she was saying. I didn't know this, but it wasn't until I think the early 90s, when we did clinical trials for drugs, we didn't include women. It was just men. And so, surprise, surprise, some drugs weren't working on women because women have different bodies. And so I think one of the big issues was painkillers, for instance. Men and women react differently to different medications. It wasn't until the 90s when we were like, hey, wait a minute, we might have to do clinical trials for men and women.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good argument for things like, well, if I wanted to steel man something like feminist studies or whatever in medicine, I would point to things like that where it's just like, yeah, we need to look at, the female aspect of things was not emphasized quite as much. And it's good that we can look at that, and maybe it's good to have people who are looking at it with an eye for these sort of types of discrimination that maybe a bunch of guys would just kind of look past.
Yeah.
But you see a new movement now that's basically claiming that there's something called feminist science that is distinct from normal science and can only be done by females, which gets rid of the whole universality of knowledge. And if you're going to get a different result based on your biological sex,
yes,
then this isn't science. This is just politics.
I love it when they say things like 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 because who made that up? And there's a viral video where it's a Black Lives Matter activist saying something like, so what, some white guy in Europe said 4 and all of a sudden everyone just says okay? That's ridiculous. And it's like, actually no, I think it was the Middle East for we use Arabic numerals, but it was multiple cultures coming with the concepts of numbers. Yeah. Well, that's where they go, man. And what's really interesting is when I bring up that we finally realized we need to do clinical trials on women, that's a good thing. And that's a representation. You mentioned this of of feminist studies or whatever in a positive sense, that there was a point where it was kind of like, hey, wait a minute, I just realized something. If we have a bunch of just one group of people from the same town, from the same school, all sitting in a room, and they haven't been exposed to other parts of the world and different experiences, there's a lot they don't know, and that's diversity of opinion, diversity of thought. So you end up saying, what would really help? If we got someone from a different school to come in here and talk to us, because they have a totally different, we're researching the same things, but I don't know what they've been talking about, what they found. If we send one of our dudes over there and one of their dudes comes over here, we'll all be more robust in our ideas and our perspectives. And that was what diversity was supposed to be. When we talked about diversity of bringing in, migrants and different people from different backgrounds, it was because they had different worldviews.
Yeah.
But now what they're doing is they're like, so long as everybody looks a little bit different, we don't care.
Yeah.
Actually, we want them to be homogenous in thought.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think is going to be the death knell of a lot of universities and fields like psychology, where you have people who are almost entirely from the left and sometimes very far left, who are just doing these studies that are, a lot of these studies, even if they study politics, they almost look at conservatism as if it were like an aberrant trait. They study at it like an alien studying something.
Yeah.
They're just like, why would anybody believe these things? So you can see that bias there. And it's just, they're unable to cover for their own blind spots, because you're going to have, science, a lot of people try to portray it as this emotionless thing where, scientists are just going in there, leave all your biases at the door. I'm just looking in my microscope and, eureka. That's not how, there's a human aspect to it. People have biases. They want their ideas to be true. And the way we control for that is by having a diversity of opinions, or people who can then check your blind spot and say, like, actually, you didn't check for this, you didn't check for that, take in these different viewpoints. But as what you said, we're not getting that type of diversity. We're getting superficial diversity of just skin color.
If I dedicated a year to doing research and I put my heart and soul into it, who are you to come in and tell me that's wrong? That would trigger me, and thus, shut your mouth and let me just believe I'm right, because it'll be happier, right?
I'd be happier too. I had ideas that turned out not to be true when I was studying.
The moon is made of cheese, and I can definitively prove it. And then you go back and create a revisionist history of how we've all heard the moon is made of cheese. Well, now we know for sure.
Can't prove it's not.
That's right. Correct.
Yeah.
Redefine cheese to
yes. We just
rock and
well, that's a big thing about what they do, and I've been talking about this for a long time. With the words gender and sex changing the definition of the words allows them to change law without having to vote on it. So we kind of have just seen this with the Supreme Court when they ruled recently. I'm sure you heard that your sexuality and your orientation are inherent components of sex. Therefore, you can't fire someone for being trans, and you can't fire someone for being, lesbian or gay, because those are fundamental components of sex. And so thus, it's not necessarily the same thing, but it's really reaching and saying, if X plus,
circuitous way to get there.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time before, gender, as I think it's obvious to most people, was put on documents so that we knew if you were male or female for very specific reasons.
That's what people have meant by gender from a legal standpoint anyway, from a very long time. It's only very recently where now all of a sudden it's a state of mind.
So you probably know this better than I do, Lydia, but I was told that in emergency medical treatment, knowing whether someone's male or female is extremely important.
Yeah, it is. And I wish I could tell you more definitively why, but I never worked in an emergency department. All I remember is nurses telling me about needing to know whether what gender
different medications,
course,
I'd imagine.
Yes,
but
absolutely. Different dosages and stuff.
But also in if someone's laying on the ground and you don't know what's wrong with them. I was reading something where it's like, it's really important when the EMTs show up that they can clearly distinguish whether or not this is male or female for a variety of reasons. So I wonder what would happen if in New York, where they recognize, I think, 31 genders. And it's really weird because they do. And some of them are the same. Like they have female to male, but they also have FTM, which is just an acronym for female to male. And then they have something called, I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, it's literally gender blender is one of the recognized New York City genders. What is an EMT or a doctor going to do when there's a non-binary androgynous individual and they're trying to determine an emergency procedure with only seconds to decide, and the form says gender blender, and there's going to be like, I'm not sure quite exactly what I should do.
Yeah, I mean, if states want to go and have people put their gender identity on their IDs in addition to their sex,
yeah,
whatever. I don't think it doesn't give anyone information that they need to know in any context. Like, we have traits on our ID so that we can be, that person has blue eyes, brown hair, is a male. These are things that can be verified, and you can, this is what the individual looks like. But to put, I'm genderqueer or something, that's not something that anyone can look at you and know about yourself.
I'm not sure why I need to know that.
It'd be like putting, boxers or briefs on your ID. It's like there's no reason for people to know that about you or your political identity.
Yeah.
Like, identity isn't relevant on an ID in any way. But if people want to do it, they can put it on there. But we can't replace biological sex with it, because that's something that's very important.
You know what the problem is? I don't care what other people do. Okay, you want to put an X on your ID because now a lot of places are allowing this. I really don't care. I'm going to mind my own business. If you want to put your identity on your ID and you put gender blender or androgen is another one they list in New York City, it doesn't affect me personally. But I have a concern then if it comes to medical treatments and the doctor can't think about it this way. 1 million people go through the medical system in New York in 1 year. It's a random number. I don't know what the actual number is. Let's say 1%. So you get 10,000 people who are of a variety of gender, right? Non-binary, gender blender, whatever. Everyone goes in the hospital, and there's a certain percentage of success and failure for the doctors on a variety of ailments. If they don't know your biological sex, they can't be as effective. So hypothesizing, you may end up with a disproportionate amount of non-binary individuals succumbing to the ailments versus, typical binary biological sexes, male or female. Normally, I would say, if you choose to do this and the doctor can't properly treat you, you make your own choice. I'm not going to intervene in your life. The problem then is someone's going to pull up the data and say, look at this. It is twice as likely that a non-binary person dies in a hospital compared to a cisgendered person. That proves the doctors are killing these people and are biased against them. That's the issue.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that is the narrative that we're going to see if that
absolutely
happens.
I'm afraid of that. And doctors already pay so much in malpractice insurance, and we're already such a litigious society, and nurses already they spend so much of their time on charting. This is just going to be more for them. This is just going to make everything objectively worse.
It's like, go ahead.
Again, because they're only measuring after the fact. They're just looking at the final numbers.
Right.
Do they just get a ruler? Do they match across the top? No, one's lower than the other. Is that a minority group? Yes. Discrimination.
And this is actually going to be, it's not just about medical practices, but there's also, it's going to manifest in a lot of different ways. Perhaps police, stops or something. Somebody who dresses a certain way is more likely to get stopped, and then they're going to draw the conclusion not based on the real reason, but they're going to look at the macro level outcomes and say, this proves discrimination.
Yeah.
Which is, if, people are dying, then that proves it. They're biased. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.